Okay, well, welcome to this week's episode of the Family Brand Podcast. You're in for, I think I say this all the time, but like seriously, a real treat with Jonathan, Nicole, Cottrell. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
So I've known Jonathan for years through the world of business, and I've always been impressed with just how intentional he and Nicole are with their family. You hear us talk about this a lot on the podcast. I think as entrepreneurs, sometimes it's easier to be more intentional about our businesses than our own homes and families. And I think it takes even more effort and work. And anytime I see a family who is really intentional and living out their values and really living in alignment to them, it always stands out to me and impresses me. And so I wanted Jonathan and Nicole to come on and just talk about how they live out their family's values and because I really think that one of the biggest risks around mission, vision, values in a company or a family is that it's really easy to let them just be words on a wall. Well, first of all, it's easy to not even create them.
Yeah.
Second, it's easy to create them and then just have them be words on a wall that you reference once in a while and have to look them up because you don't really know them. And then third, it's like really live by them. And the Cottrells really live in alignment with their values. And their mission, which I love, is to live and love freely, which I think had something to do with them selling their home and deciding to spend their summers abroad. And so they've spent. So why don't we just start there? Tell us how the mission to live and love freely led to kind of selling your home and traveling abroad.
Maybe even before that, like a really brief, tell us, about your family.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Melissa's here to ask the really important question.
Yeah. Okay. So we have 3 kids, 16, almost 17, daughter, Riley. We have a just turned 15-year-old son, Tolan, and then about to turn 12 this week, Beckett. So 2 boys and a girl. We've homeschooled from the beginning, as they say. What else?
Yeah, very entrepreneurial from the get-go, and Nicole's been very supportive of that journey all the way through, which has been amazing. And that journey always has ups, downs, lefts, and rights as well.
Yeah, famous last words. I have an idea. All entrepreneurs.
Or hey babe, I just got an amazing new domain name.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's cooking. That's right. Yeah, so our mission statement, I don't entirely remember how it came about, but our family mission statement, but Jonathan and I both have a high value for freedom, and it shows itself differently in our personalities, but both of us, we don't, the concept of being tied down or feeling restricted or just being limited, I think, is something that kind of scares both of us, but we wanted to press into that in a healthier way and say, well, actually, it's not that we're scared so much of being tied down, but that we enjoy freedom, and how can we embrace that? And Jonathan started talking about the idea that a lot of times people they don't structure their lives, I should say, around what they value. We just kind of like let life happen to us. And we started talking about, well, how do we actually structure our life to align with our values, not the other way around, which is what happens a lot of times for people. And that was kind of the beginning, I think, of that process.
Yeah, I think unpacking that a little bit, just the idea that most people get backed into their lives based on the constraints that they're already within. So I have this job, my kids go to this school, I live in this home, and I pay this mortgage, whatever it might be. And so as a result of those walls and that box that has been created, you start to structure and make decisions because of that, rather than going the other way around and saying, what is it that we want to build and build towards? What do we want our lives to look like? And then do the hard work. It might be hard work for a little while to get out of those boxes, out of those constraints, but then start working towards what it is that you envision.
Yeah, I love that. And we just did an episode, I think a week or 2 ago, about the model of have, do, be versus be, do, have. Right. So a lot of people are like, well, what do I want to have? And then I get backed into what do I have to do? And then I ultimately get backed into, oh, well, this is who we've become, but it was kind of by accident. Instead of like what you're saying, get out ahead of it and like, no, like, what's the life we really want to live? And let's make that the priority and make that the focus. And it's so cool. I mean, and clearly you have done that, and you're doing it because of how you're living out your life. And it's like living a life by design instead of by default. And I think it's so weird though, how all of us are so susceptible to having our family be the last consideration, and the lives we actually want to live be the last consideration in all of it.
Mhm.
When it's like, well, no, it's our lives. Like, it's our family. That should be the first consideration, and things should be built around that. But it's really easy to lose sight of that.
I think it's, of course, especially for entrepreneurs, I think it's so easy for a business to become a baby. You know, you're growing it, you're nursing it, you're caring for it, you're investing in it, you're up all night with it. You know, those things are real. Jonathan, to his credit, though, I don't feel like we were ever secondary. I do feel like we were always first priority. But there are, of course, seasons, and there are seasons where you have to press in and you have to spend more time on your company. That's a real thing. So not to negate that at all, but also to say, we talk a lot about seasons. We know there are seasons for that press in time. We know there are seasons where we recoup and we like spend more time together and we hunker down and have that time, because we know the next season might be more late nights or travel or, you know, work travel, whatever it might be. So we do think a lot about seasons and how that kind of affects our family dynamic too.
Good. Yeah, that's great. I love the idea of seasons.
Okay, I want to hear about going back to your travel. Tell us about your adventures that you've been taking.
Yeah. Well, a couple years ago, as our daughter was entering into high school, or about to enter into high school, we had this. I guess it was right before. When was it? I don't even know. Years wise, I guess it was right after COVID.
Mhm.
And really, what we were thinking about, just had the idea kind of pass by. Hey, sell the house and get out and start traveling. I was like, that's a crazy idea. Threw it aside. About a week later, the idea pops in my head again. And so when that happens, I'm like, okay, Lord, what are you doing? So I'm just trying to pay more attention and discern like what's happening. This idea kind of feels random. So I start praying about it. I talk about it. I come into Nicole. I say, hey, Nicole, I know this is going to sound crazy, but what if we sold this house that we think is our forever house, where we thought we were going to be grandparents, and start living abroad during the summers? She goes, I had the same idea this week. And I was like, okay, something's happening. So right from there, it was like, you know, we talked with some family members, we prayed about it, consulted some folks, and then I think 2 weeks later our house was on the market. A month later it was sold. Basically, from the point of our original conversation to us living in a rented house, and then actually living in South Africa, it was about 5 months from that point.
Really blazingly fast.
It was very, very fast. And we're just very thankful for what it's been. So last year we were in South Africa. This year we spent time primarily in Asia, primarily in Thailand, but we did Japan and Singapore and Malaysia and I don't know, some other spots as well. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Any ideas for this upcoming summer, 2024?
Jonathan's main goal is to hit all the continents. So
so Antarctica next
yeah,
that's where he's headed, and we will be waving to him from mainland. No, probably South America, for a few different reasons. So that's where we're leaning. But yeah, I always, when we've had the opportunity to share this story with people, I do always say, like, it sounds so glamorous and like, wow, people are like, we wish we could do that. We want to sell our house and travel the world with our kids. And I mean, yes, that is technically what happened. However, it's not that easy, of course, or simple, or you know, we had a lot of big emotions around it. One of our children had a very difficult time, leaving their childhood home, moving to another place. Also, we should say we intentionally moved to a very different neighborhood. We moved to a much more diverse neighborhood, but very different socioeconomically on purpose. We wanted to be around people that were different from us in lots of good ways, and really just exposure and all of these things. And so it was just, there was a lot of bumps. It wasn't just this like fun thing.
It wasn't smooth all the way
yeah.
through. Yeah.
But it was of course awesome. And we had a really wonderful time in Cape Town, and we learned so much as a family, and, you know, it was a great first place for us to land. But those adventures and like living out your family mission isn't without some of the, well, just the messiness of, you know, life and the hard times that go along with it. Like the good stuff is good and the hard stuff is part of that.
Our one of our family, well, our 5 family values are trust Jesus, love well, give thanks, work hard, and take risks. And so, you know, I think we have seen all of those come to bear as we've gone about this effort. And yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome. It reminds me when you're talking the Helen Keller quote, life is either one daring adventure or nothing at all. Or, you know, not nailing that perfectly, but we went to Europe for 5 weeks of summer and hopped around, did some other things. And, you know, we've had people along the way be like, kind of, you know, what do you think life is? Just like one big adventure. And we're like, yeah, we kind of do. Yeah. Like you nailed it, you know?
That's right.
And adventures are like perilous. Like people get frostbite on adventures. People perish in adventures. People have really hard things. And there's like these exciting times and these, you know, joyous. And it's like, but I love this idea of adventure and all that the lessons that come with it. And we've certainly experienced that.
Do you remember the store Successories? It was in the mall. It had like all those, you know, kind of cheesy sayings, but you know, like a soccer ball, and it's like you'll miss 100% of the goals.
Okay.
Got that. Or there was one, it was a ship on stormy seas, and it said a ship is safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships were made for. So to give you an idea, that is all I had on my wall when I was a kid. Like those were the posters that I had on my wall. So I think to that point, like you're not going to get the reward without the risk. You're not going to you know, experience that, and it's going to be hard, but that's part of what makes it worth it. Yeah,
I love that. That reminds me of the No Fear t-shirts back in the day. Like
Similar, very similar.
My favorite No Fear t-shirt was hold my trophy while I kiss your girlfriend.
Oh gosh.
My mom hated that shirt in junior high.
I think
more important things, Melissa, what were you gonna say?
Well, it reminds me of a conversation I was having with someone earlier this week who was contemplating selling, you know, their home and moving to a very different location, moving from Canada to the southern US. But she was just asking, like, what were the implications for your teenagers? Was we moved from Arizona to Hawaii in 2021. We lived there for a year. So she was asking me, like, what was that like for your kids? Did they adjust? And as I was reflecting on her question, I thought, you know, it reminded me of all the very hard things, especially, you know, for my older kids, but also those very hard things and that getting out of their comfort zone. It reminded me of all the wonderful things that came out of that for our family and for our kids that I would not have happened. 100% would not have happened if we had just stayed where we were at.
Absolutely.
You know, one other thing too that Nicole and I have talked about quite a bit is that it's 2 things. One, I mean, it's a risk as parents. I mean, because, you know, we envision a day in which we're grandparents and our kids are near us and we want that to happen. But also, like, doing all of this globetrotting, it runs the risk of our kids being far gone from us down the road. And we have no idea what the full fruit of this is going to be, what these seeds are going to produce over the rest of their lives. So we can see some of that early fruit now. In fact, it's been probably earlier than we anticipated in some cases, but also who knows what it's going to do for them, for their character and what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. We know it's shaping them far beyond what we can see in the immediate. And it's probably going to help shape some of maybe what they do in the future, where they live, who they marry, what kind of job or they might seek out. Being exposed to different places in the world is bound to do that when you're a young person. So yeah, they could, well, we know our middle son, he's already has plans to move to Japan. Like that is his next step. And he's thinking about it all the time. He's only 15. Yeah. So you know, we don't know. We know that it's going to definitely have a big impact on them far into the future, but it's just exciting to see.
Yeah, I do think it is fascinating how much that can shape them. And Melissa and I, one time we were taking our 3 oldest down to Guatemala, and there was a woman that we sat next to on the plane who was a college professor. And she's like, "Oh, I think it's so wonderful you're bringing your kids and you travel with them." And she told Melissa that I can tell within the first week of class every year when I have new students, which of the students have traveled, whether they tell me or not.
Wow.
That's
That's
amazing.
not
Yeah.
surprising.
Just because of just their confidence and just the way they navigate things and the questions they ask. And so it's like, yeah, who knows how it will shape them. That is really interesting and exciting to think about how it could influence, because we have that same vision of like, we're all going to live within a square mile of each other and see our grandkids every day. Like,
Right.
and part of me hopes that they do go on crazy adventures and it gives us a reason to go visit them all the time. And,
Exactly.
so
You say that too. You're like, hey, if you go there, we'll be there too.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
yeah.
I talked with someone who did a lot of travel. I mean, he probably did about 40 countries or so before he had his first child with his wife. And he had said that it produced actually more of a grounding in him later in life. Like he actually was, he had seen so much. And so coming back, he's like, America's pretty great. I like it here. He still loves to travel. He still goes, but because he did that, he had less wanderlust later on.
Yeah. Out of his system. I think it can go either way for people.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it is crazy though, how much, like, the only reason we moved to Hawaii was because I think really our family value of Smiths are adventurous. It was that one value of saying it enough to actually believe it and actually start exploring, well, what would it actually look like to live that out? You know? Not that you have to move to Hawaii to be adventurous, but for us, that's just what occurred to us, is like, that would be a way for us at this time. That's what's calling to us.
Very similar story to yours, actually.
Yeah, that's so cool.
It's good.
Yeah, I know. I think back, like, what if we hadn't like listened or done that thing? And people thought I think some people thought we were bonkers. Like, some of our family members were like, you're going to do what now? And you're going to sell your biggest asset and you're going to, walk away from that. And also, we know it's a privilege to even have a house that we could sell, that we could take money from and, put into savings and all of the things around that. And we were like, yeah, we are. And we kind of, right after, we were like, man, we feel so free. We were the relief, we didn't even know that we were going to feel that. That wasn't even part of our thought process. We were just like, let's go travel. Yeah. But there was a totally different benefit and side effect that happened. And we couldn't have even anticipated that.
I think what you're talking about too is this idea that, and Nicole at one point said, this makes sense. You don't work for a company, you work for yourself. Our kids aren't in a normal school. We homeschool. We're actually not part of like an institutional church. We've done home churches like our entire life. Yeah, it makes sense that we wouldn't like be part of the system and have a mortgage and just like do this, traditional thing. But there's so much, like you said, living by default, you just kind of fall into, and it's not like we see, owning a house or as bad. It just, for us, it made sense, and it really does free us up. I mean, we also like really crammed down from, less than half of the square footage we had. So we're on top of each other now. And what that has produced even within our home is just like more togetherness.
Yeah. I had read some blogs about like tiny house living, not that we're in a tiny house, but we're in a much, much smaller home and we don't have room to spread out like we used to. We used to be able to hide from each other in our last house. It was big. It was too big, honestly. And the closeness that we've created, even just being like in a smaller space and having to kind of be in each other's business more, has also been an unexpected benefit that we didn't really anticipate, but that we enjoy. Yeah.
I love that. We've had similar experiences, and it's funny. Our favorite accommodations was this little, when we went and did Europe, it was this tiny little Airbnb in Switzerland, had low ceilings, but it was just so cozy. Yeah. Just like, and we just loved it. And we were all over each other, but it just felt so good in there. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'd love to shift with it being the beginning of a school year. I was just having a conversation with a different mom the last few days who is homeschooling their eighth grader for the first time ever. They've never homeschooled before. And so again, she was asking me advice and suggestions, and it just had me thinking like back to the beginning of our homeschool journey. And I'd love to hear, maybe just ask you about your homeschool journey. How did you decide to homeschool? And then, if you were talking to someone that was contemplating homeschooling, what would be your advice for them?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, to be honest, I had never met a homeschooler until I met Jonathan. So I grew up in public school system with a single mom, and I didn't know any homeschoolers. And I really thought they were all just weirdos.
And she was right.
And I wasn't. And he was very neutral with me. He was like, I'm never going to pressure you. Like whatever we end up praying about and deciding for our family, that's what we're going to do. And by the time I had a kindergartner, I had a 3-year-old and a newborn, and I was just tired. And I was like, man, I do not want to get in the car and dress all of you people and drive to a building and then take you there and then drive back a few hours later with a 3-year-old and a newborn. So I'm just going to keep you home for 1 year. And I never put her in school. And then we just kept going. So I really do say it was accidental. I really never intended to homeschool, and I certainly didn't intend to homeschool all the way through. But once I really embraced it, I was like, okay, it makes sense. Like Jonathan was saying, for how we already live, non-traditional in a lot of ways, or I should say unconventional, maybe is a better term. That, yeah, it has been great for us. Advice. Gosh, I don't know. That's so hard. I think that keying in on your main motivator is so helpful, because my main reason for wanting to homeschool, besides just being tired at the time, was I really wanted my kids to have as much childhood as they could. Yeah. And that was just so hugely important for me. I don't think that was something that I got to experience for a lot of different reasons. And so that being my kind of guiding motivator, when you can clue in on that, it's cliche, but like your why is this important to you? That's really encouraging on the hard days and the bad days and the days when you call your spouse and you're like, why are we doing this? I want to quit. I'm putting them all in school on Monday, because we all have those days. But I just would think, man, I really want them to squeeze out every last drop of childhood goodness and be kids for as long as they can. And I think homeschool has been one of the ways that we've been able to do that. There are many benefits to homeschooling, but that's one of my favorite.
Two other things I'll just briefly add on to what she said is that, one, I think, coming back to values too, like what is it that you want to produce in your children? So, we have our family values. I mean, that's going to be key. But we also even just have almost like a rubric for us of saying, what is it that we want to produce in our kids by the time they're leaving our home? And it was really like 3 things: godly character, strong communication, and problem solving. And we think like, if they get one of those, that's great. If they get all 3 of those as they leave our home and go out into the world, they'll be really well equipped for what it is that they're going to go out and be and do. And then secondarily, I think travel is one way we've done it, but also Nicole really embraced the Charlotte Mason methodology and philosophy in our homeschooling. So she has started something called Stories of Color too, but really like this idea of like literature and viewing the world through these windows and mirrors of books and literature. So I think in the same way that we want our kids to experience different perspectives and culture in the world through travel, she also does very much within education as well.
Yeah.
Storiesofcolor.com.
Oh
Check it out.
He's plugging me.
Oh, that's cool. It's something that you yourself have developed.
Yeah, Jonathan and I started it together a couple of years ago. So yeah, it's really a resource for homeschoolers, but it's kind of grown for educators in general. But yeah, it's a catalog essentially of thousands of diverse living books. So people can find books that reflect their family culture, their family heritage, places around the world, learn about people that look like you and don't look like you.
Yeah. That's really cool. I'll link that in the show notes, and I'll check it out myself too.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the things too that I think happens sometimes in everywhere in life, school systems, workplaces, where it's just everything's so focused on doing. Like, what do we got to do the next thing? What do we got to do? So it's like do. And so much of our journey that, you know, around just personal growth, personal development has been around this idea of like being, and who are we being and who are we becoming. And I think that that's another benefit the homeschool can offer, is it's not so much focused on doing and like what curriculum are we doing, or what assignments are we doing. And it can be more focused on like, who are we helping our children become, and who are they becoming, and who are they being? Well, this is amazing. And like, I knew this would happen. And I told myself, I was like, I think we could probably do like a 10 episode series with the Cottrells, because there's so many things to talk about. And so I love that, you know, one of the questions we always ask families is like, okay, what are you known for more than anything? What are your values? You've obviously shared all that.
Yeah, such a beautiful example of what having, you know, this vision and values, like what that can actually look like, implementing it and integrating it into your family. It's very cool.
Yeah, totally. So
Thank you.
I guess in closing, if there was, let's, because I think it's been our experience that a lot of families have a desire to live like this. When I say live like this, just live more free in a way that's aligned with who they really want to be and who they are. And maybe that's never been modeled for them in their family, or it's just scary. Or so I would love to hear from both of you. What would you say to a family who is starting to feel the itch to like, I want to do something different, I want to live free, and yet there's a ton of pressure from our family, the school system, our society?
What's your first piece of advice?
I think the first piece of advice, it's not something I would have thought of, but as you asked the question, it's what comes to mind. I was talking with someone, and he was talking about being visionary or having vision. And as I've talked with some people about that lately, I've communicated that it's not a vision unless it's written down. And so I think just the starting point is not just dreaming about what's possible or talking about it, but actually doing the work to synthesize that, articulate it, and put it down on paper. It doesn't mean that it has to be final. It can be a working draft, but then iterate on that and get it to a point where you say, this is it. And then continue to believe that, put it up in your home, put it on your mirrors and your screensavers on your mobile phone. But until it's written down, it's not real. And that is, I think, the birthplace of then what that vision and that dream and that life could become. But you have to have something that you're chasing towards. And until it's there, it's not real.
That's
I love
good.
that.
I would say a step further from that, because I think, or we mentioned even earlier, that a lot of times people will write down values and they'll put them on the wall, but they don't do anything with it. You know, it's just hanging there. It's a nice idea. I think one thing that Jonathan's really good at consistently, that we've all learned from in our family, is to take inventory. And if you say like, well, let's do this thing, but then nothing happens, I mean, that's easy to do. But taking inventory, where you actually are assessing and saying, he'll sit us down with the kids and be like, okay, these are our family values. What are we doing really well right now? And what are we not doing well? And it's convicting. We're like, oh, we know, like we generally usually know, like, oh, we're not, you know, giving thanks as easily. That's one of our family values. And there's been more grumbling and whatever that might look like. And taking stock and inventory, I think, is one way to help keep yourselves accountable, your children accountable with each other. Are we, what we're doing, what we believe in, does it look like how we're living? Are we living out this thing that we say we care about? We take inventory with the kids to, like, after a trip, we say, what are your takeaways? What was most impactful to you? What surprised you the most? What did you learn? You know, what was different than you expected? And these kind of processing this stuff out for them, it helps us just hone in on like, what's good? How do we do it? How do we get better at it?
How do we keep doing it?
And how do we, maintain it essentially? And so, I don't know, I think taking personal inventory, inventory as a family, you know, those are the things that have encouraged me the most, and just kind of put a fire under me too, to, you know, live like we say we want to live and look like we want to look.
I love that. I actually think it's a beautiful combination of the two, of like, yes, let's create a vision of what's possible, get it on paper. And then let's take an inventory of asking, like, are we living in alignment to that vision? Because it's easy to do neither of those. Have the vision, not actually take an inventory all the time, but it's like, of what, right? Like, you know, so yeah, I love that. And look, you know, I think that's a huge part of the purpose behind this podcast, is to help maybe inspire families to think bigger about what's possible for them.
Mhm.
Like that you really can be the family you want to be. You really can live the life you want to live, you know. You really can be the spouse, the parent, you know, that
Mhm.
you want to be. So, well, thank you so much for coming on. You guys are an inspiration to us. I'm inspired. We'll link to, like we said, Stories of Color. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, we just appreciate you being a light out there in the world and being an inspiration to families like ours.
Likewise. Thank
Same.
you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Hmm.